Guys, please confirm to me. All of you are getting my voice on screen. Those are attending in online. Guys, please confirm to me. All of you are getting my voice on screen. Those are attending in online. Here. Durga. There, Radla. Hello. Hello. All right, sir. And check it what we completed in the last session. I think so. We are discussing about URL pattern mechanisms. We are discussing there. Where out of all the URL pattern mechanisms, we completed already directory match mechanism, directory match method, and exact match method we completed already. Here now we are going to understand extension match method. Here we are going to understand. Try to recognize this extension match method. Okay. All right, sir. In the last class, I given one example, one use case I given for filters, and its related content I given filters and related content. We are going to understand it. Okay. So tell me, what is a filter? What is the purpose of the filters in web applications as per the last class content? A filter is a web component. It will be executed before executing the servlets, and they're able to provide some pre-processing and post-processing services. They're able to provide pre-processing and post-processing services before executing the web components. That's the purpose of like what their filters we are having clearly. To define URL patterns of the filters, in general, we are going to use directory match method. In the directory match method, the URL pattern should start with a slash, and that URL pattern should end with what their star. Okay, in between that, we can provide any URL pattern name. If any incoming request which is coming, by matching the prefix value of the might be filter URL pattern, automatically filter will be evaluated. After evaluating that filter only, that request will come to the respective servlets. In this example, all of you observe carefully. In this example, all of you observe carefully. URL pattern which we define for filters is in which mode, in which mechanism? Directory match method. But URL patterns are defined for servlets in which mechanism? Exact match method. So URL pattern we define for servlets is what there? Exact match method. URL patterns we define for filters is what there? Directory match method. Understand it clearly. Okay, now it is completed. Next one is like what there. After this, extension match method. That's the last one, last definition for this last one. extension match method. What is the purpose of this extension match method? Okay, how we are going to define URL pattern with this extension match method? Right, observe carefully. In this approach, we will define URL pattern in a web.xml file. In this approach, we will define a URL pattern in a web.xml file. In web.xml file, okay. It must not be prefixed with a slash. It must not be prefixed with a slash, and it must have an extension. Any extension. It must have an extension. It must not be prefixed with a slash, and it must have an extension. I'll take an example. By that we are able to get it. Web app. All right, sir. Web app. Next one is slash web app. Now inside this, some tags here we are able to write. Inside these tags here, we are able to write like what there. Servlet mapping. Then inside this slash servlet mapping. Now inside this servlet mapping here, we are able to have like what there. URL pattern. Now understand it clearly. We can use, right sir, observe carefully. It should not be started with what there. It should not be started with what there slash. Any pattern name here we can use. Now here the point is like what there. In general, star dot do that we are going to use. Yes, sir, what is it now? Star dot do. Better I want to say like what there. It must not be prefixed with a slash, okay, comma. It may start with a star, not like this star here. Anything here we can use, and it must have an extension. Say for example, now in this example I'm using star dot do. This is a utilization actual, that's why I'm using that. But actually abc dot to do, xyz dot to do, that we can use there. But it is almost similar to what their exact match method if it is a case now. But if you put star, then only it will be good. Understand my point here now? Okay, star dot to slash URL pattern that we can use. Okay, like this here we provide it. Observe carefully. Okay, it must have an extension, and it may start with a star, no issues. Star, and it must have an extension. Right, so that extension may be anything. That extension may be what there, anything we can use. Okay, now observe carefully. What URL patterns are valid with respect to this particular URL pattern definition? What URLs are valid? All right, understand it clearly. If we want to access the respective server side resource, if we want to access the respective server side resource, we have to use an URL pattern at a client address bar. We have to use an URL pattern at a client address bar. It may be anything, but its extension must be matched with the URL pattern extension that we defined in a web.xml file. So here altogether, what is the point here I'm telling there? We can provide any URL pattern at our client address bar, but it must be matched with our URL pattern. Means that extension what we provide in the URL pattern, and here whatever the extension here we provided, that both must be matched. On the basis of that extension match only, we are going to identify the respective server side resource. Observe carefully. If you want to access the respective server side resource we have to use an URL pattern at the client address bar. It may be anything, but its extension must be matched with the URL pattern extension that we defined in the web.xml file. Now see this one here. If it is a case now, http colon slash s localhost colon 1010 slash app and slash, observe carefully, login dot do. Your extension is what there dot do we provided. Here also be what we have to provide there dot to do. Here we have to specify. Next one is similarly http colon slash s localhost colon 1010 slash app slash registration dot to do. It's valid. Still it is valid. Next one is what there http colon slash s localhost colon 1010 slash app slash something else like what there add dot to do. Okay, like this here we can do. Next one is what there http colon slash s localhost colon 1010 slash app slash what I'm telling there. Observe carefully. Search it dot xyz. Alright, sir. Then if that extension is not same, then it is invalid. If we provide the same extension dot to do, then it will be valid here. But name may be anything. It may start with anything. Why? Because that starting one is what we provided here. Star we provided clearly. So now we can understand clearly. This is like what there valid. Now here it is like what there. This is like what there valid. Understand it. Now this is like what I'm telling there valid. Okay, now here we can understand this is like what they're valid. In this way, here we are able to utilize this, sorry, invalid. Yeah, this is invalid, not valid. Why? Because dot xyz here we provided, this is invalid now. But observe carefully, this URL pattern approach is a frequently used approach for defining URL patterns for the controller servlets in web MVC, in MVC based applications. I'll discuss with you what the meaning of MVC later on. But this URL pattern approach is the frequently used approach for defining URL patterns for the controller servlets in MVC based applications. Yes, sir, all of you are getting it or not? Right, sir. This is the point here we have to understand. This is a URL pattern approach is a frequently used approach for defining URL patterns for the controller servlets in MVC based applications. What is the advantage we are able to get from this approach there? I'm able to give some points here. In MVC based applications, some approach is available. Understand it clearly. For example, here we provided login.do. What controller servlet will do there, it will terminate the dot to do. It will take only login, then it is going to perform login action at server side. If we provide registration.do, then what controller servlet will do there, controller servlet will terminate this dot to do. It will take the URL that is like what their registration. It will perform registration at server side. That means some module, some action is available with respect to the same REG. On the basis of that REG, particular action is going to be performed here. I get my point or not? In general, we are defining this URL pattern for servlets directly. But this time, controller servlets are going to take the URL pattern names. On the basis of that URL pattern names, they are going to execute some other programs inside the server side. Some other action classes they are going to implement. They are going to execute at server side. In this particular requirement, we are going to use this particular mechanism. This is an advantage of this particular mechanism here now. So now I will give the point here. I try to understand it clearly. In general, in MVC based web applications, controller servlet has to perform some actions, or else maybe has to execute some action classes on the basis of the URL pattern name. In general, in MVC based applications, controller servlet has to execute some action classes on the basis of the URL pattern names. Okay, to achieve this requirement, to achieve this requirement, we have to use, we will use extension match method. We will use extension match method for what purpose there? No, to define URL patterns for the controller servlet. Right, sir. Now I want to take one simple use case. Now try to understand this use case. No, easily we can identify this. Now try to understand it. No, for example, I have MVC based application. Now again, for example, MVC based application. Right, so now again, I want to take 3 user forms. Now again, I want to take, this is like what there, add form dot HTML or JSP, no issues. Now this is like what there, search form dot HTML. Now this is like what there, delete form dot HTML. Now again, a student ID, for example, I'm going to take student ID and student name. Now next one is what there, student address, like this here we are taken. Here we are having like what button here, add button here we are getting. Okay. Now here we are getting like what there, add button. Understand it clearly. Now student ID, search. Now here similarly I want to take like what there, delete now. Here also we require the student ID. Now here we are able to have delete. Right, sir. So these are overall 3 forms here we are getting clearly. After this, now this is what there, the front controller. This is what their controller. Now this controller was what their controller servlet, front controller servlet. Now at server side, we are having 3 action classes here we are going to perform. What action classes here we are going to perform there? We are going to provide there. First one is add action. Add action in the sense, if the request is coming from add form.html, its related implementation is available where add action. Next one is after this search action. Similarly, delete action. If the request is coming from search form, automatically search action has to be executed. If the request is coming from delete form, automatically delete action has to be executed. This is a punch here. Fine. Now URL pattern for this controller servlet here we are going to provide like what there, star dot do. That do is not mandatory. Any extension here we can use. Of course, in some cases we are going to provide dot action, even that one also we are going to use. That dot do is not mandatory. Any extension here we can use, but in general we are using what there, dot to do. Okay. Now in this case, what is going to be happen? For example, if we provide data, student ID, say for example S-111 and S name is something else AAA, S address is like what their, Hyderabad, and if we click on this add button, If we click on this add button, automatically with respect to this add button, request will come to like what their controller servlet. When request is coming to the controller servlet, then what controller servlet will do now? Okay, it will take that URL. What is that URL here? We are submitting there through this now from this form http colon slash s localhost colon 1010 slash app slash. Now here we are providing like what there add dot to. That's the URL here we provided. When we provide this URL, now here what controller servlet is doing there, it will check it. If the URL is like what there add data do will be removed. That URL is what the URL pattern is what there the add. Then immediately from here it will forward a request to add action. That means that controller servlet is performing action on the basis of the URL pattern name. In this way, this controller servlet is designed in the case of MVC based applications. Right. So next one is after this. For example, student ID. That means student ID is what there S-111. And next one is after that, if we click on search button, what button here we click there? Search button. If we click on search button, automatically a request will come to like the same controller servlet. Request will come to the same controller servlet. Now here, what controller servlet is doing now is doing the work. Just 1 minute. Okay. What controller servlet is doing the work now? Okay, first of all, we have to provide that URL. What exactly the URL here we are using to submit request there? Now understand it clearly. http colon slash s localhost colon 1010 slash app slash. Now here we have to use like what there search dot do. What we are using here search dot do. If we provide this search dot do, now here this controller servlet will take that URL pattern. In that URL pattern dot to do it will remove. Because of dot to do only request is coming toward their controller servlet. Okay, once that URL pattern is coming to the controller servlet, it will take that URL pattern and search. As per this search, if it is a search now, then immediately it has to forward that request to the respective what their search action. Now search action will be performed here. Respective student is going to be searched on the basis of the student ID. Then we are able to send the student details back to the respective client. Next one is in the same way here if we provide right sir. Now here if we provide the same thing, then what is going to be happen there? If we provide some data like what here again here student iPhone 111, if we provide this data and if we click on this delete button, automatically a request will come to like what there controller servlet. Now what controller servlet is able to do there, it's able to check first of all it will delete the data do extension. Because of the data do only request will come to the controller servlet. Now it will take that URL pattern. Once it has taken URL pattern, automatically it will take like what there. Of course now here I'm going to provide that URL is like what the URL is uh, say for example http colon slash s localhost colon 1010 slash app slash then what next one here delete dot do. If we provide this data, then automatically here what we are able to get the request. That means URL pattern name is delete now. Directly it able to forward that request to like what there to the delete action. Clear? All of you are getting it or not? So on the base of the URL pattern, if you want to perform a particular action at server side, there we are going to use what there extension match method. In that extension match method, dot do is for the sake of bringing that request to the controller servlet. Now controller servlet will take that URL pattern name and is able to perform the respective action in our applications. In this way, we are going to utilize like this what their extension match method. Understand one more point here. The same requirement we are going to achieve by using directory match method also. It's possible. Understand my point? But this is comfortable environment. This is a suitable environment to use like what their extension match method for these controller servlets in MVC based web applications. Okay. All right, sir. Now here I want to give this copy here. Now try to understand it. Almost all the cases here we provided about like what there like URL pattern definition mechanisms. Now tell me overall how many approaches are available to define URL patterns now? Three approaches are available. What are the three approaches here we are getting there now? First one is like what there exact match mechanism, directory match method, and other one is like what there extension match method. These are the overall approaches here what we are getting clearly. Okay, fine. Leave this one. All right, sir. Now we are discussing actually what topic no? What's the topic name? Servlets, sir. Inside the inside the servlets, what topic you are discussing there? Server, just wait here. You are giving right answers now. Tell me. You're gone. All right, sir. What topic you are discussing there? Java features, sir. I'm asking topic name only. Servlet, server. Server is in client server architecture, right? So still we are in client server architecture, right? What happened in between you? Why you are okay? All right, sir. Anyway, the topic name is what? 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 Steps to prepare web application. Steps to prepare first web application is a topic name. Yes, sir. I think you forgot the topic name there, but you are understanding that internals. Okay. In steps to prepare web applications, how many parts we understood there up to now? What points we understood there? What steps we completed? First one is what? Download and install server software. Which server we installed in my system? Tomcat server. Damn good. Good. Nice. You understood that. Next one is what? Next one here? Prepare web application directory structure. Prepare web application directory structure that we completed. Okay. After preparing web application directory structure, third step is what? Prepare deployment descriptor. Prepare what there? Deployment descriptor. After the deployment descriptor, what next one? Now this topic is under what there? Prepare deployment descriptor. No, this topic is under what? This topic is under what? Prepare deployment descriptor or any other one? Prepare deployment descriptor only. Inside this only we are discussing this content here. Okay. Right. Listen carefully. So web.xml file deployment descriptor is nothing but what there? Web.xml file. Okay. Topic names are not aware. But concepts you are trying to understand. But you are giving very good reply when I'm asking some questions there. But topic names you are not giving properly. Okay, fine. Now I have a question. Before going to wind up this total web.xml file deployment descriptor concept, I have a question. What is my question here? Understand it now. Is this web.xml file is mandatory or optional in web applications? Half optional or half mandatory? What you're saying, sir? Is it mandatory or optional in web dot? That means in web applications, web.xml file mandatory. Okay. All right, sir. Now this is question. Now my question is what there? Is it possible to prepare web applications? Is it possible to prepare and execute web applications without having web.xml file? That's a question. So here we have to give answer for this question there. Without having web.xml file, is it possible to prepare and execute our web applications? Answer here I'm giving to you. Now try to understand it clearly. All of you observe carefully. In web applications, listen carefully. In web applications, in web applications, web.xml file is mandatory or optional, is dependent on the server which we are using, which we used. Points I'm telling there. Cases are available. I'm giving that cases to you. Now try to understand the cases now. Case number 1. Observe carefully. Points I'm telling to you. Right, sir. What is that case number 1 here I'm telling to you? For example, when web.xml file is mandatory in our applications up to now, as per the thinking, in web.xml file we are providing servlet configuration, filter configuration, listeners configuration, this components configurations here we provide it. Okay, two cases. If we prepare web application without servlets, filters, and what next one here, listeners and so on. If we prepare web applications with the servlets, listeners, and filters, that the two cases here I'm taking. All of you are getting it or not? Case number 1 is like what there. All right, sir. Case number 1. If we prepare web applications without the web components like servlets, like filters, listeners, and so on, then observe carefully. If we prepare the web applications without the web components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, then and so on. Now, here in this case, now, depending on the server, we are able to make web.xml file is optional. Depending on the server, we are able to make web.xml file is what there optional. Understand it clearly. Now I'm giving one more point here. If we use these servers like Tomcat, then web.xml file is optional. Web.xml file is like what there optional. If we use the servers like WebLogic, then web.xml file is mandatory. Then only if we provide web.xml file, then only that application is going to be deployed in some other servers. But in some other servers, if you are not using the dependent components like servlets or filters or maybe listeners, no, web.xml file is optional, not required to provide this. That is depending on what their servers, that what we provided clearly. Okay, do one thing in web applications, web.xml file is mandatory or optional is depending on the following cases. Directly I don't want to say server, no, depending on the following cases we are able to provide. Case number 1 here I provided. Okay, fine. Now case 2. Understand this case is our required case. Now try to observe this clearly. Case number 2. If we prepare the web application, with the web components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, then web.xml file is optional or mandatory is optional or mandatory is completely depending on the servlet version which we used. Here also some sub cases are available here. Understand my point here? Now, all right, sir. Now here, point number 1, I am telling to you, observe carefully. If we use the servlets version, if we use the servlets version up to 2.5, what's that version here? Up to 2.5, then web.xml file is mandatory. Web.xml file is what there? Mandatory. If we use the version servlet version up to what there? Up to 2.5, then web.xml file is a mandatory. Second point here I'm telling to you, observe carefully. Next one is if we use the servlets version from 3.0, after servlet 2.5, immediately the version is what there? 3.0. If we use the servlets version from 3.0, then the web.xml file is optional. Then the web.xml file is what there? Optional. Okay. All right, sir. Web.xml file is optional, but we are able to provide servlets configuration through servlet configuration through annotations. As an alternative for web.xml file, we are able to use what there? Annotations. Understand it clearly now? Okay. Finally, the point here, what I'm telling there, on the basis of the cases only, we are going to decide that web.xml file is mandatory or optional in our applications. Case 1, if we prepare web applications without the web components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, depending on the server, we are able to make web.xml file is optional or mandatory. If we use the servers like Tomcat, then web.xml file is optional. If we use the servers like WebLogic, then web.xml file is what they're mandatory. If we prepare the web applications with the web components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, then the web.xml file is optional or mandatory, is completely depending on the servlets version which we used. If we use the servlets version up to 2.5, then web.xml file is mandatory. If we use the servlets version from 3.0, then web.xml file is optional. Okay, in place of this web.xml file, what we are able to provide? What we are able to provide here? We are able to provide what there? Annotations. They're the points here we have to understand. On the basis of that only, we are going to identify web.xml file is optional or mandatory, that we can understand. All of you get my point or not? Right, sir. Now, one more question, interview question here, we have to understand it clearly, all of you know. Now, question is, the point is like what there? Observe carefully. In web applications, is it mandatory to provide deployment descriptor? Deployment descriptor in the sense what? Web.xml only. Deployment descriptor is what there? Web.xml file only. So in web applications, is it mandatory to provide deployment descriptor with the name web.xml under the location web-inf? Is it not possible to change the name and location of web.xml file? Yes, sir. All of you understand my question now? So in web applications, is it mandatory to provide deployment descriptor with the name web.xml under the location webinf, is it not possible to change the name and location? Right, sir. Now, observe carefully. This is my question here, what I have asked there. Now tell me, what is the status of this? What is the answer for this question here? Observe carefully. In web applications, deployment to descriptor, name and locations are fixed. It is not possible to, change the name and location. It is not possible to change the name and location. Why? Because, observe carefully, when web application details are required by the container has to get the details from web.xml file only. But how container will search for this web.xml file, and where, with which name it has to search for with which name it has to search for the deployment descriptor? The container will search for the deployment descriptor with the name web.xml under the location webinf folder only. That's a predefined implementation inside the container. That is a predefined implementation inside the container. Sir, all of you are getting my point or not? So because of that reason, it is not possible to change the name and location of the web.xml file. It is a fixed. Alright, sir. It is not possible to change the name and location. It's not possible to change the name and location of the deployment descriptor. Why? Because why? Because container was implemented in such a way that to search the deployment descriptor with the name web.xml under the location web-inf. That's it. Because of that reason, it's mandatory. Got it or not? All right, sir. Now, last question. One more question in this deployment descriptor that we have to understand. All right, sir. Now, in web applications, is it possible to provide web applications? Is it possible to provide more than one URL pattern for a single servlet? In web applications, is it possible to provide more than one URL pattern for a single servlet? This is a question now. In web applications, is it possible to provide more than one URL pattern for a single servlet? That's a question here. Okay. Now here we have to understand answers here. Now try to understand it clearly. Answer is very clear. Up to servlets 2.5 version. Up to servlets 2.5 version, we are able to provide only one URL pattern for the servlet. For servlet only one URL pattern. Up to servlet 2.5 version. Sorry, up to servlet 2.4 version. Up to servlet 2.4 version, only one URL pattern per servlet. But from servlets 2.5 version onwards, we are able to provide more than one URL pattern for any servlet. More than one URL pattern for any servlet. we can provide this. Okay, but up to 2.4 version, only one URL pattern. Right from servlets 2.5 version onwards, we can provide any number of URL patterns here we are able to provide. But how it is possible here, we can understand it clearly. I'll define this one. Now try to observe carefully. Web app. Under this web app, now inside this here we are able to provide servlet slash servlet here. I want to say, for example, I want to provide like what there servlet name. Now registration servlet. For example, this is a logical name here we provided. Servlet name that we provided. Next one is what there servlet class. Here we are going to provide that servlet class is what there registration servlet or register servlet. Both are same. We can use. Now here this is like what there servlet class. Then after this, after completion of this, another one we need to use like what there servlet mapping. Under this, what we are able to provide there servlet mapping. Now inside this servlet mapping, we are having like what there servlet name. Now this will be like what there registration servlet slash servlet name. After completion of this, here we have to provide like what there URL pattern. Now observe carefully. One URL pattern I want to provide like what there slash reg. Now URL pattern. Another URL pattern here we are able to provide like what there. Say for example slash register slash URL pattern. Okay, like here we are able to provide like what there another URL pattern like what there slash user registration slash URL pattern like this. Now how many URL patterns we define for a single servlet? No, 3 URL patterns here I provided. Of course, if we provide this URL pattern, we can access that registration servlet with any of these URL patterns. By using either of these URL patterns, we are able to access the respective servlet here now. Right, so now observe carefully in the above context. In the above context, we are able to access registration servlet. We are able to access the registration servlet by using either of the URL patterns. Either of the URL patterns. Right, so now we can understand what are the various URL patterns here we are able to use there. Say for example, HTTP colon slash s localhost colon right 1010 slash app slash. Now here we can use reg. It's okay, valid. Similarly, we can use like what there another one. Now register is also be valid. Okay. Next one is what there user reg. User reg. Exactly here we can use that. Now here we provided registration, reg register and user register. Like this, anything here we are able to provide. So all are valid here. We can understand. This is like what they're valid. Now here, this is also be like what they're valid. We can understand. Now this is also be like what they're valid. So by using either of these URL patterns, we are able to access the respective server side servlet, respective servlet here. So these are the points here we understood about like what there the total URL pattern and its definitions content here we understood. Okay. All right, sir. Next one after completion of this. Another topic is like what there. Now prepare web resources. Prepare what resources can no prepare web resources. Observe carefully. What are these web resources here we are going to prepare no? What are the various web resources here we are able to prepare there? Of course, now we are talking about servlet application, that means web application. Our first priority should be for what there servlets creation. How we are able to create servlets? That's the question now. Okay, in web applications, to prepare servlets. Of course, web resources may be normal UI related resources, HTML pages, JSP pages. We can prepare servlets. We can prepare. But mainly our focus is on what their servlets, how to prepare servlets. So we are going to talk about it in web applications to prepare servlets. Okay, to prepare servlets, we require some predefined library. Then before that, I'm asking one question to you, try to answer for it. I want to prepare my own exception. I want to prepare my own exception, user defined exception, custom exceptions here I want to prepare. Then how it is possible to prepare our own exceptions now? We have to take one user defined class. That user defined class must be extended from exception class, predefined class. Leave it. I want to create my own thread, user defined thread. Public class my thread extends a thread class. There's some predefined class libraries available. Understand my point here? Similarly, if we want to prepare servlets, if we want to prepare servlets, there we have to use some predefined library. Sir, all of you get my point or not? To prepare servlets where we have to use what there? Some predefined library. How this predefined library is available? From where we are able to get this predefined library? How we are able to get this predefined library? Now I'm able to give some package names now. Now try to understand it clearly. In web applications to prepare servlets, we have to use the following predefined library, provided by servlet API, provided by what there servlet API. What exactly the library here we are able to have? We are able to have. Try to understand this clearly. Now, first of all, we want to have a package. This package name maybe either we can say Java X is a older one. Nowadays it is what there Jakarta package name. Observe carefully. Jakarta is one of the organization we can understand. Previously, Sun Microsystems or Oracle Corporation has maintained that servlet API. They provided the complete servlet libraries through Java X package. Later on, the Java API, servlets API maintenance was given to Jakarta is a company. Now it is providing the servlet API with the package name Jakarta package name. Latest versions are coming with the Jakarta package. Older versions are available with what package there? Java X package. Not only in the case of servlets, the total enterprise edition, enterprise applications, enterprise edition J2EE part was given to what there? Jakarta only. There every package name inside the Jakarta API, we are able to get what there? Jakarta dot something. No. Okay, now this is one thing. After this, one more package is available internally. What is that? Another package here. This package is servlet. Package name is what there? Servlet. Okay, it may be Jakarta or it may be Java X. That doesn't matter. The child package, sub package is what there? Servlet only. Inside this servlet package, there is an interface. Servlet interface is available. Servlet interface is existed. After this servlet interface, one more implementation abstract class is available. That is generic servlet. The generic servlet is like what there? Abstract class. Generic servlet is like what there? Abstract class. After this, one more child abstract class available for the generic servlet. This is HDP servlet. This HDP servlet is like what their abstract class. Observe carefully. Now, this HDP package, HDP servlet is available in a package. That package name is like what their HTTP. Okay. Now understand the relationships also. Servlet is an interface which is implemented in generic servlet. Generic servlet is a super abstract class for the HTTP servlet. Here the relationship is like what there implements, and here the relationship is like what there extends. We can extend one abstract class to another abstract class. We can implement one interface to the one abstract class. This is a point here we have to understand. Okay, now for example, I want to get a servlet class. I want to access servlet class in my Java application. I want to access servlet class in my Java application. What package here I have to import now? I want to use servlet class in my Java application. What package can I have to import there? Jakarta.servlet.star. Import Jakarta.servlet.star, or we can use javax.servlet. Depending on your servlet version, what we are using. I'm going to use the latest versions of the servers, not older versions there. There we can see like directly what there Jakarta.servlet only. Yes, sir. I'll forget me point or not. So already we installed 10.1 version. It's the latest version of the Tomcat. Supporting what there Jakarta API only, not Java X API. So we are going to use that. For example, I want to use HTTP servlet class in my program. HTTP servlet class here I want to use there. What package here I have to import now? Come on, what exactly the package here we have to import there? Import jakarta.servlet.http package. Import jakarta.servlet.http package, that we have to import clearly. Right, sir. Now understand this clearly. So this is the predefined library here we are using to prepare the servlet classes. That's okay, fine. Immediately we are getting one important interview question now. What is that question here we are getting there? Observe carefully. What is servlet? What is servlet? And in how many ways? And in how many ways we are able to prepare servlets in web applications? That's it now. This is a question here we have to understand. What is servlet and in how many ways are we able to prepare servlets in web applications? That's it. First of all, what is servlet? What is servlet? That point also here we have to understand. Observe carefully, all of you know. Servlet is a server-side program. Yes, sir. Am I right or not? Servlet is a server-side program. It will be executed by the container in order to process the request and in order to generate dynamic response to the client. Okay, understand my point here. Servlet is a server-side program. It will be executed by the container in order to process the request and in order to generate dynamic response to the client. This is one definition I'm telling there. And I want to give another definition here now. Listen carefully. Here, I'm giving some points now. Servlet definition here I'm telling you. We are discussing about it. Next one is after this. Another point is like what there. Servlet is an object. Yes, sir. What is the next one here now? Servlet is an object. Okay. Servlet is an object managed by the container. Managed by the container. Okay. It can be used to process the request. Same thing. But here I said to you server-side program. But now I'm telling it is what there? Server-side object. Definitely. Server-side program in this sense is Java class. For the Java class, container will create an object. That container will manage that object. That's why I said to you servlet is an object managed by the container. Okay. Okay. Managed by the container. Next one is what there? It must implement either it must implement servlet interface. It must implement servlet interface either directly or indirectly. Either directly or indirectly. In order to, or else maybe directly or indirectly, it can be used to process the request. Mainly, the servlet's main purpose is what there process the request. But in its own way, it is not processing the request. Somebody else has to process that request. Part of processing the request, that servlet program has to be executed. Just it is a code. That's it. It doesn't have any liveness. But server or container is having some liveness. I get my point or not? So that server or container will take the request. Upon receiving the request from client, server or container will identify the server-side resource, that is servlet class. Then container will execute that servlet class. By that only response will be generated. So that's why given some type of definitions here we can understand. Okay, good. Servlet definitions are okay. But how we are able to prepare these servlet classes in web applications? How it is possible to prepare servlet classes in web applications? If we observe this point here, answer is very clear. As per the predefined library, as per the predefined library provided by servlet API, as per the predefined library provided by servlet API, there are three ways to prepare servlets. There are three ways to prepare servlets. What are the three ways to prepare these servlets now? As per the predefined library provided by servlet API, there are three ways to prepare servlets. What are the three ways to prepare servlets here? Number one, point number one, observe carefully. Number one, observe carefully. Number one, by implementing servlet interface. By implementing what the servlet interface. Second one is by extending generic servlet abstract class. By extending generic servlet what their abstract class. Next one is after that by extending HTTP servlet abstract class. By extending HTTP servlet abstract class. Overall, these are the three approaches here what we are getting. First one is what there by implementing servlet interface. Second one is by extending generic servlet abstract class. And third one is what there by extending HTTP servlet abstract class. They are the three approaches here what we are getting clearly. Alright, sir. Now here, if you observe this first one here, what is that first one here? No, by implementing servlet interface. If you understand this, by implementing servlet interface approach here, if you take now, it's very simple. Now try to understand it clearly. Inside this, to prepare, is it? What happened? Time, what is the time? 9:10. I'll stop up by 9:30. No food? Really, is it a problem? Huh? 9 o'clock. I think daily you are not having food, right? So what is the problem today? 9:30 or 9 o'clock? 9 o'clock only. Shall tomorrow we'll discuss. Not tomorrow, Monday. Thank you. One minute, 1 minute. Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks a lot. I'll meet on tomorrow. I'll meet on Monday. Monday same time here. I'm able to continue the class.